and welcome back to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Now, the Ukrainian incursion into Russia is now in its third month with little indication that it's going to end anytime soon. And despite a series of Russian counterattacks since the push began on the 6th of August, Ukraine continues to control an area of around 1,000 square kilometers inside Russia's Kursk region. And now, while many continue to view the Russian military as an irresistible force with virtually limitless supply of manpower and equipment, it is now increasingly apparent that in reality, Putin's attempt to conquer Ukraine has left his army dangerously overstretched and unable to defend Russia. Now, to explore this further, I'm joined by Wierenga, lecturer in international relations with the Baltic Defense College. Sir, good morning. It's a pleasure of having you here with us on World Talks on TVP World.
Good morning. It's great to be with you.
Now, so let's get straight into it. Now, with reports of increasing bounties for Russian recruits, Putin is promising less jail time for criminals, rising the age of volunteers, average age of volunteers. How serious, can you tell us, is actually Russia's manpower challenges and the impact that it's going to have on this war moving forward?
Well, the Russian military is not on the brink of collapse. There are certain shortcomings. They have failed to achieve their objectives from the beginning, and now it's just a waiting game because Putin has made it very clear that he sees the Russian military as essentially a meat grinder. If when the Ukrainians came into Kursk, the vast majority of the Russian soldiers were young conscripts that weren't able to effectively thwart the Ukrainians in their plans. And there are reports of naval shipmen being transferred to do an infantry job, which is insane. But Putin's ambitious plans to further expand the size of Russia's army to 1.5 million soldiers will make that the second largest military in the world after China. So I think it's a waiting game to see who can strategically maneuver and what kind of bargaining chips each country will have if they even go to a negotiating table, which is highly unlikely because neither the Ukrainians or the Russians appear to be willing to give even an inch.
Now, really still staying on this topic. Now, we're talking about here recruiting Russian sailors and prisoners being deployed as infantry into Ukraine. Now, how do these unconventional recruitment methods, if we talk about the psychology behind this, actually affect the morale of these Russian forces?
Well, I'm sure that the morale isn't good. The kind of Russian military rule of the day is that Moscow has a greater capacity to absorb battlefield casualties and keep the fight going because they just see it as a meat grinder. So I guess, if you are defending your territory, and I'm talking about the Ukrainians here, you really have something to fight for. And you believe in something, if you are forced to do it, or if you are asked or made to go to the front lines to avoid jail time. Now we're not even clearing jails. Now it's just people who are getting sentenced saying, okay, instead of going to jail, you can go and fight in Ukraine. I can imagine that the morale isn't good. But then on the other hand, when you get to putting your boots on the ground in a high-intensity kinetic conflict, I guess staying alive is a greater incentive for some of those people. But I just don't see why anybody would, take pride in fighting for Moscow. So there is a difference in that sense.
That's right. It's very interesting what you said, those last words particularly. What can we say? What can you tell me about Russian public opinion on this? We're talking about, do they even know the numbers, of the soldiers and, their own Russian civilians that they're losing in this war? What is Russia's public opinion about this?
Well, I think that's kind of a twofold answer. First, there's a public opinion inside of Russia, but then there's also the way in which Putin and his inner circle have acted that signals opinion to the broader West. On the one hand, Putin's nuclear rhetoric is nothing new, but it's been awfully quiet considering this is the first time that Russia has been invaded since the Second World War, and there are reports that there is some uncomfortable quiet inside of the Russian Federation. But the message from Putin is basically that this is the new reality, which to me seems a bit weird because, from a strategic standpoint, if you are going to use all of the propaganda arms that the Kremlin has been using, with all of this ridiculous nonsense about their denazifying the region and that it's the United States that's using Ukraine as a proxy war, and then something like this happens, it seems to me a bit bizarre. So it is really calm. So that, to me, signals that either it's going to get worse, which is probably not the case, or it's just going to be that Putin is biding his time because, as I mentioned earlier, Russia just has a greater capacity to absorb battlefield casualties and keep fighting because of the way that they're, even getting foreign fighters from outside of Russia to enlist in the army and go to Ukraine and fight. They're just trying to weigh out the clock.
Sir, what does Ukraine's cross-border incursions into Russia, which is, now we're 3 months into that, reveal and tell us about the current state of Russian military capabilities, defense capabilities?
Well, I think what they're trying to do is that Ukraine is trying to gain ground in Kursk, and Russia is trying to gain ground in Donetsk because each side wants to use whatever advantage they come to in those respective two kinetic hotspots to their advantage in terms of claiming some kind of victory in the war. So if Ukrainian troops are able to maintain a presence in Russia, then Moscow cannot claim any type of victory in this war. Although of course they're not credible and their media lies all the time, so they probably will do that. But what they claim in terms of propaganda and what's actually reality, it's a bit harder to conceal from their public, as we mentioned earlier, as well as the general global population who's following this. So if there's a surrender that's not in question, but also a total military victory on behalf of Ukraine being unlikely, then we could see mutual land swaps as a kind of third way to end Russia's second war of aggression against Ukraine. So I think that what the Ukrainians are hoping to get out of this is saying that no, we're not going to cede any of our territory, but if you get your troops out, then we will stay out of the Kursk region. And I don't think that the Russians are going to be able to push them out. I really see them putting most of their effort into Donetsk because I think that the Kremlin understands that this is becoming more and more likely with each day, a way that this conflict could end for the time being, at least.
Sir, let's talk about these videos that have been coming out of particularly Kiev in Ukraine. So we have viral footage of military recruitment officers really raiding Kiev. There was a concert of this famous Ukrainian band Okean Elzy, right, known for that song just since the beginning of when the war actually started. What can you tell us about this? It's a little bit difficult to watch those scenes.
You're talking about the police arresting people who have not shown
raiding,
up for conscription?
That's right, but we see some aggressive videos coming out, all over Telegram channels, Platform X, really aggressively, stopping cars, grabbing males out of the cars, really checking their identity. We've seen some aggressive videos. What can you comment on this?
Well, look, their country is facing a brutal and unjust war of conquest, and many of the things that the Russian Federation has done to the population of Ukraine is just horrible, completely unjust, and violates any type of moral and legal laws. And so the Ukrainians need everybody that they can to fight to defend their territory. And I've only seen one or two of the videos that you're discussing about. I've mostly read about them, but the police are doing their job, and war is never fun for anybody. War is hell, and that's something that nobody really wants to go through. themselves. And it's an unfortunate situation, I guess, to see things like that. But the Ukrainians know better than anyone what they need to do to defend their country and to stop this from happening. And they need as many people as they can get to keep the fight going.
And so just very briefly, I mean, U.S. Elections are coming up very soon. How do you think this is going to shape the dynamics of this war going forward, just very briefly in under a minute?
Oh, wow. That's quite the task. Well, I think that everybody everywhere that is invested in this war and a lot of other things geopolitically is holding their breath to see what's going to happen after November 5th. And I think that it's going to be so close that we won't know until after Christmas at the earliest. And I think that there's a lot of unknowns with President Trump. If he wins, what are they going to do? It seems like the Harris if Kamala Harris wins the election, she will keep going and supporting Ukraine. But I think that support to Ukraine will mean different things for each candidate. I think that very quickly that President Trump will want to end the war with some definitive end to say this conflict is over, whether it means that Russia will never come back.
And we'll have to wait to see until, I guess, post November 5 to see what the future will hold. Thank you so much, Sir Louis Wierenga, lecturer in international relations with the Baltic Defense College, for being with us here on.
Thank you for having me.
TVP World. And that completes this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Up next, more news. Stay tuned.